So Ilhan Omar was viciously smeared by Republican Dan Crenshaw, and then also later on by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And she was smeared over some comments that she made at CARE. And CARE is the Center or the Council on American and Islamic Relations. And this is one of those groups where there's just endless xenophobia and bigotry and fear-mongering from the far right, where they try to pretend like this is a Muslim Brotherhood front group or something, when it's just simply not. Like, the whole point of CARE is a bunch of Muslims get together and they try to make it so that the United States of America does not fear them. Like, that's the whole point, is like... And I know some people who are in the organization, and they're wonderful people. Like, the idea that they're, stealth jihadists or something fighting to implement Sharia law. No. It's a group of Muslims that's saying, hey, we're really not that bad. You guys mind accepting us? And I'm not kidding about that. That's what the group is for. So Ilhan Omar gave some comments speaking at a CARE event. You're about to see the full comments, but they took what she said here out of context and ran with an insane attack against her. Take a look.
It doesn't matter how good you are. If you one day find yourself in a school where other religions are talked about, but when Islam is mentioned, we are only talking about terrorists. And if you say something, you are sent to the principal's office. So to me, I say raise hell. Make people uncomfortable. Because here's the truth. Here's the truth. Far too long, we have lived with the discomfort of being a second-class citizen. And frankly, I'm tired of it. And every single Muslim in this country should be tired of it. CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. So you can't just say that today someone is looking at me strange, that I am going to try to make myself look pleasant. You have to say, this person is looking at me strange. I am not comfortable with it. I am going to go talk to them and ask them why. Because that is a right you have.
Okay, so do you get the gist of what she's saying there? It's very straightforward. She's saying 9/11 happened, and then Muslims were looked upon in the United States as, incredibly sketchy. And people started giving you side eyes, and people started being scared when they saw Muslims. And it was viewed as, well, obviously you're either a terrorist or you're a terrorist sympathizer. And that's what led to a giant backlash. And there was an increase in hate crimes. And it was an increase in hate crimes, not just against Muslims, but also against Sikhs. Basically, people with brown skin. That's why it's always such a weird non sequitur point when people say, like, oh, Islam is a religion, so you can't be you can't be racist against a religion. No, the point that people are making is, when they talk about anti-Muslim bigotry, is that in the eyes of, your average American, when they think of Muslims, they think of, people of Middle Eastern descent, Arab, or just really brown people. Like that's what they think of. Now, that's actually not true that that's the biggest contingent of Muslims. In fact, I think, what is it, Indonesia that has the most? I think it's Indonesia, but don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But that's not what people in the U.S. think when they think of Muslims. Oftentimes, just people of Middle Eastern descent. So the point that she's making is, after 9/11 happened, the Muslim civil liberties of Muslims kind of got stepped on You don't believe me? Go look at the terrorist watch list where they started loading up Muslims on the terrorist watch list. By the way, there's no due process whatsoever to get on that list. You can't get your name off once your name is on it. And they would just go, I don't know, good enough. Guilty enough. So, but furthermore, people would look at Muslims and just be scared and just think, well, they're either terrorists or terrorist sympathizers. And the point she's making is a similar point to, what if there was a string of, let's say, 3 or 4 abortion clinic bombings? Some people did something there, and then what? Should all Christians be looked at with a side eye? Should there be this default setting of bigotry against Christians in that situation? Because that's not okay. So that's the point she's making. Now, for those of you who don't know the specifics of this scandal yet, I will ask you, many of you probably already know the specifics of the scandal. But for those of you who don't, what do you think they isolated out of that clip to make their incredibly shitty, hacky smear attempt? You know what they isolated? They isolated when she said, on 9/11, some people did something. So they clipped out just that. Ilhan Omar saying, on 9/11, some people did something. I think it was Dan Crenshaw who originally did it, Republican congressman. And they were pretending that she was being dismissive and undermining what happened on 9/11. So, in a supreme twist of irony, Ilhan Omar was making a speech about how, because of 9/11, you have, the default setting for many Americans is to look at Muslim Americans and be scared and give them the side eye and think either they're terrorists or terrorist sympathizers. That was the whole point of the speech. And then Dan Crenshaw and Donald Trump go on to prove her point. Dan Crenshaw isolating that little part of the clip and acting like, I guess you don't think 9/11's a big idea. You're seriously going to make that argument? That's what you took away from that clip? That Ilhan Omar is somehow sympathetic to the 9/11 terrorists? But that's exactly the point Ilhan Omar was warning against. Stop looking at us like second-class citizens and just assuming that, like, the grossest, worst elements of Islam reflect average Muslims in the United States of America. And then Donald Trump takes that little clip, isolates the part where she says 9/11, some people did something, clips that out, and then shows video of the towers falling on 9/11. And tweets like, we will never forget. So again, implying that Ilhan Omar is somehow sympathetic to what happened on 9/11 or dismissive about what happened on 9/11, when that is obviously, in context, not at all the point that she was making. And again, you went on to prove her point. Her point was, we're not second-class citizens. You don't have to be scared of all of us. We're regular people, but now we're looked at and people go, they're probably terrorists or terrorist sympathizers, and we don't like that. And then they go on to prove exactly what she was saying. And Donald Trump, by the way, is a guy who went on TV the day the towers came down. The dust was still in the fucking air. Everybody was still scared to death. And what does he say? Well, I used to have the second tallest building in New York City. Now I have the tallest building in New York City. And you're going to accuse Ilhan Omar of diminishing 9/11? There was one time when Donald Trump referred to 9/11 as 7/11. Now, listen, am I going to, harp away on this and focus on this and act like now I don't think Donald Trump, or act like now Trump is fine with all those people dying on 9/11 because he had a slip of the tongue and he said 7/11 as opposed to 9/11? No, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not a fucking hacky bitch. I'm not a smear merchant. You know who is a smear merchant? Dan Crenshaw. You know who is a smear merchant? Donald Trump. You know who are smear merchants? Every single fucking right-wing outlet that ran with these dishonest attacks. And now, as a direct result of this dishonest attack, there's been a giant spike in death threats. Why? Because you're implying one of the first female Muslim congresswomen is sympathetic to 9/11, and now you're going to have people go, well, fuck that. And so they call her and they threaten her, and her life is in danger. By the way, before they even ran with this grotesque smear, somebody was just arrested for a credible threat against Ilhan Omar's life. And the President of the United States of America has put her in further danger because he's implying a sitting congresswoman is sympathetic to 9/11 terrorists. Well, I have one fact that utterly destroys your shitty, grotesque smear attempt. Ilhan Omar has co-sponsored the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. Many of the Republicans who are currently attacking her and acting as if she's sympathetic to 9/11 terrorists, many of those Republicans have not co-sponsored the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. So she's there for these people in their time of need. She's there for the victims of 9/11. She wants to give all of them health care. And these people who are politicizing this issue and acting like she's sympathetic to 9/11 terrorists, they're not there for the people who are still victims of what happened on that day. These are not good faith critiques. On purpose, they are taking things out of context to drive home a narrative. And that narrative is insanely dangerous. At a time when we just had the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand,